Hello and welcome to your next class of this quick revision series of the upcoming Prelims 2024, which is scheduled to happen on the 16th of June. This is class number 6 and today we will be beginning with the news related to international relations. In the last class we had wrapped up our news stories related to Indian polity. Now we are going ahead with international relations. In international relations, mainly we study about the places that are in the news, also some important treaties or agreements that India has been a part of, or important treaties for other countries as well. Once again reminding you, if you want the PDF of this lecture, all that you need to do is join the Telegram channel. The Telegram channel would have all the PDF of the lectures that are conducted here. To join this Telegram channel, you can click on the link in the description of the video and you will become a part of it. Now let's begin. The first news story is that India trained ASEAN women in UN peacekeeping operations. Now, as you know, India has always been one of the largest contributors to the UN peacekeeping forces. In fact, this is one of the arguments that India usually gives when we try and have a strong case for becoming a permanent member of the UN Security Council. It also indicates how India's relationship with ASEAN has been improving. So from this news story, you have to take into consideration how does a UN peacekeeping force work, the composition, so on and so forth. So the news was that during the ASEAN Defense Ministers meeting in November 2022, India had said that we will be training 20 UN peacekeeping officials, specifically women officials from ASEAN, that took place this year. There were about 2 participants from each of the 10 ASEAN nations. Now, the UN peacekeeping force specifically works on 3 principles. Consent of the parties involved. So if there are 2 parties involved between which UN peacekeeping forces have to be sent, both the parties have to agree, not just one. Second, impartiality and non-use of force except in case of self-defense. And third, defense of the mandate that has been given to them. Now, the UN Security Council is the agency that controls the UN peacekeeping forces. In fact, this is again the argument that India gives, that since India supplies so many troops to the UN peacekeeping forces and they work under the orders given by the UN Security Council, that means India should also have a permanent seat in the UN Security Council because it is our troops whose lives are at stake here. The chapter number 7 of the UN Charter talks about the UN Security Council having the power to authorize peacekeeping operations anywhere in the world. How do they get the money? So UN does not have any fixed source of money. As you know, the UN mainly depends upon the donations given by member nations. All the UN members share the cost of the peacekeeping. The cost of the peacekeeping usually is on the basis of the assessment, taking into account how rich the countries are. So countries such as Germany, Japan, they contribute a lot of money, and not as much money would be contributed by poorer African or Asian nations. The UN peacekeeping forces, it is important for them to be recognized from far away so that they are not attacked. Let's say if this is the border, one side, let's say this is South Korea, this is North Korea, in between there are the UN peacekeeping forces. So both the sides should recognize them so that they don't attack the UN peacekeeping forces. That is why UN peacekeeping forces usually wear a very distinctive blue colored helmet. That is why they are called the blue berets or the blue helmets. Berets is a kind of a cap that you see some army people wearing. It's a kind of a cloth cap that is tilted. If you Google, you will be able to find out. So they are called the blue berets or the blue helmets. Again, the idea is to make sure that they are identified from a long distance and no one usually attacks them. UN peacekeeping forces have already gotten the Nobel Peace Prize in 1988 for their contribution towards world peace. Next important news story. Another important part of how the world functions is in the news. That is the International Court of Justice. It's in the news because multiple countries have gone to the International Court of Justice against Israel. As you know, ever since Israel was attacked by Hamas, Israel has been launching a huge offensive in the territory of Gaza. And that is why a lot of countries saying that Israel is not using the principle of reciprocity. That is why many countries, starting from South Africa, had gone to International Court of Justice. Countries such as Turkey also supported that idea. Now, what exactly is the International Court of Justice? The ICJ is the principal judicial organ of the United Nations. Now, This is important to understand. This is the only main principal organ of UN that is not in New York. So it's in the Netherlands. It was established in June 1945 with the Charter of the UN. Also, it has two official languages, do remember, English and French. What do? So they have two functions mainly. First function, they give advice to UN agencies. So UN agencies like UNICEF, UNESCO, those agencies that work, if they want any advice on legal matters, this court will give them the advice. Second important work is this one, that is to resolve dispute between two parties. Now this is important. How is it that two parties disputes are resolved? If the court, for example, gives an order and says that Israel should stop its attack, would it be binding on Israel? Yes and no. Yes, in the sense that yes, whatever the court says cannot be challenged, but no in the sense because there is no one that will be in power to actually implement that decision, and we'll discuss that in just a bit. All the members of the UN, all the countries automatically become the members of the International Court of Justice, but that does not mean the court will automatically take up the cases. So if there is a issue in between two countries, someone has to bring the case. Only then the court will agree to hear the case. Judgment of the court is final and technically binding, you can't really appeal. But again, the problem is, even if the court says something that is binding, who will implement it? If the country is not willing to implement, does someone has the power to force the country to implement? On paper, it is a UN Security Council that has a responsibility of implementing the decision of International Court of Justice. So on paper, it is a UN Security Council member, but in reality, it does not happen. Especially when the decisions are against a permanent member of Security Council itself, like if a decision is against China, China has lost cases against Philippines about the South China Sea dispute, they never even bothered to pay attention. If a decision comes out against, let's say, Russia or the US, they would obviously not do anything. And if the decision comes out against one of their friends, like if a decision comes out against Israel, US will make sure that they don't do anything to forcefully implement it. So the court itself does not have any power to ensure compliance. Security Council, as per the UN Charter, should do this, but again, they also don't do this in a lot of cases. What about India's connection with the court? India has had multiple judges in the past serving in the International Court of Justice. In fact, even today, we have a judge, Justice Dalveer Bhandari, who works in the International Court of Justice. Then there have been others in the past, B.N. Rao, Nagendra Singh, R.S. Pathak, etc. The International Court of Justice in total has 15 judges and they serve a 9-year tenure. The qualification is that whoever has to become a judge should be eligible to become the judge at the highest court in his or her country. So Dalveer Bhandari, for example, should be eligible enough to become a Supreme Court judge in India, and that would make him eligible to become a judge in International Court of Justice as well. In order to become a judge, the judge has to win a vote separately in the UN General Assembly and in the UN Security Council. Even if one of them do not vote yes, then the voting will happen again. So in both the bodies, the voting will happen separately and the judge will have to win that vote. Next news, India was offered a place in what you call as a NATO plus. NATO has been a lot in the news, North Atlantic Treaty Organization, group of America and European countries sticking together and promising each other we'll defend each other. But apart from that, also over the years, America has been trying to expand the reach of NATO. So they came up with the idea of NATO plus. So NATO plus would be NATO and some other countries specifically aimed at controlling the rise of China. So the countries in NATO plus are not really European countries, they are mostly those that are in the sphere of influence of China mainly. India was also offered that you should also become a part of this. India has not officially accepted this. Please remember, India is not a part of any military alliance in the world. We were offered this NATO plus bait, but we did not take it. NATO plus right now has 5 countries: Australia, New Zealand, Japan, Israel and South Korea. You remember, these are the 5 countries that form a part of NATO plus right now. India is not here. India was offered this by the US Congress, but that did not happen. It's not a very old grouping. It was formalized in 2019 itself, specifically to curtail the rise of China. One interesting country here is Israel. Israel does not speak against China. Usually, you will see Israel and China actually share a very formidable relationship. There's a lot of trade between Israel and China. Yes, Israel is much closer to India, that is true, but Israel and China also don't really speak up against each other. They usually support each other in economic terms, etc. But Israel is a part of this group because Israel will do anything for the US. That is how Israel has become a part of NATO plus. So again, India has been recommended in this, but India has not accepted the bait so far. Do remember. There are a lot of important things about NATO. This group has also been a lot in the news. It's a group of 31 nations that came into being after Second World War, 1949. The idea was that the countries will help each other mainly in matters of defense, military. The most important provision of this treaty of NATO is an attack against any one of us will be an attack against all of us. In fact, one of the reasons why Ukraine-Russia war started, as per Russia, they were not happy that Ukraine was contemplating joining NATO. Russia did not want a NATO country sharing its border. It is article number 5 of this treaty that says an attack against any one of the members will be considered as an attack against all the members, and thus everyone will come for their help. It is headquartered in Belgium, that is in Brussels. Another important news story was the World Bank, who got its new president, and this new president is an Indian American, Ajay Banga. In the history of the World Bank, all the World Bank presidents have always been American citizens. It's kind of an unwritten rule that president of the World Bank will always be an American citizen, while the head of IMF will always be a European citizen. That's a kind of an unwritten rule at these places. The reason why it is so is that the World Bank, the largest shareholder in this bank is obviously the US. So they have that power and they use that power to a good extent. Remember, there is no one single organization called the World Bank. World Bank is actually a World Bank group which comprises of these 5. IBRD, IDA. So the difference is IBRD and IDA, both of them give loans. IDA give loans to the poorest countries, so at a lower rate of interest, and they give it at a slightly higher rate of interest. Not very high, but their rate of interest will be slightly higher than IDA. IFC, they give loans to private companies. Then there is MEGA, Multilateral Guarantee Agency. What it says is you should invest money in those countries also where there is a war, or there is a threat of war. We will guarantee that if something wrong happens, we will give you the money. It's kind of an insurance. For example, right now, no one would be willing to invest money in Afghanistan. Everyone will say, oh, Afghanistan is so dangerous. So MEGA will say, you go and invest money in Afghanistan. If something wrong happens to your investment, we will give you the money back. Then there is International Center for Settlement of Investment Disputes. As you can see, this settles dispute between investors and the countries if there is an issue. Now, for India's point of view, do remember, India is a part of the first 4. India is a part of IBRD, India is a part of IDA, we are a part of IFC, and we are a part of MEGA. However, India is not a part of ICSID. Why? Because we do not want any other agency to come and resolve disputes between our government and an investor. If there is a dispute between an investor and the government of India, we would want our judiciary to take up that matter and not this external organization. So remember, out of these 5 agencies that work in the World Bank group, India is a part of 4 and not the 5th one. The World Bank leadership is with the president. As I told you, president has always been an American citizen. That's a tradition. It's an unwritten rule. Also, whoever has been nominated by the US has to be confirmed by board of executive directors that work in the World Bank. President has a 5-year term and can be renewed time and time again without any conditions. The president of the World Bank is responsible for the overall working of the bank, for forming policies. However, the president does not have a vote except in case of a casting vote. So similar to our Lok Sabha speaker. that if there is a matter under discussion, the President of the World Bank will not vote at the first instant. Only and only when there is a tie and the casting vote has to be placed, only then the World Bank President rather will go ahead and cast his vote. Next important news, the Artemis Accords is where India has become a part. What is Artemis Accords? So it is basically a treaty started by the US, where the US wants countries around the world to work together in space exploration. India has become the 27th signatory of this accord. Basically, these countries have agreed that we will work together to explore the space. For example, let's say there's an Indian satellite in the space, or there's an Indian astronaut in the space. If they have a problem, then some other country, some other astronaut should also be able to help them. That is collaboration. Artemis is named after the Greek moon goddess. The idea is to collaborate on space exploration and to build further on Outer Space Treaty of 1967. It's not an old treaty, it was a treaty that started in 2020. It started with 7 countries: US, Canada, Italy, Japan, Luxembourg, UAE and the UK. It has expanded to over 20 countries now, with India also becoming a part of it. What is the objective of this project? The objective is to have a base on the lunar surface. So to have a base on moon, if astronauts go, they can stay there. To have multiple spacecraft to ferry humans and cargo. So if one country's astronauts are in space, maybe some other country can send the spacecraft, or if the spacecraft is nearby, they can help them out. Help or create an orbiting space station, have a constellation of satellites to help with navigation, communication, etc. It is expected that the first Artemis crewed mission of all these countries working together should be landing on the moon in 2026. NASA has been emphasizing that they would want the program to first take a woman and a person of color to the moon to show diversity. As you know, there are not a lot of women and people of color who have been to space, and that is why NASA wants to correct that going forward. Another important treaty in the news was the High Seas Treaty that was adopted by the UN. This is the first ever treaty on the high seas that has been adopted by the UN at the international level. Now, what exactly are high seas? As you know, any country's coastline, so if this is, let's say, India's border, from here 200 nautical miles will be India's exclusive economic zone. So 200 nautical miles, up to that India can claim whatever minerals that we find. But there is a large area in the world which is not under any country's EEZ or exclusive economic zone, which is beyond 200 nautical miles of any country. That area does not belong to anyone. That area is called the high sea. So high sea are those areas which are not a part of any country's exclusive economic zone, territorial water, internal water, etc. It is beyond 200 nautical miles from the coast of that country. So it's a kind of a global common. Global common is a concept that this belongs to each and everyone and not to any single one. This country has been adopted by the UN, and again, it has not come into force so far. It has to be ratified by 60 countries first. Ratified means it has to be passed by their individual parliament in their countries. Now, what does this treaty say? It basically talks about ensuring that we have enough provisions for conservation of the high sea. For example, it will demarcate marine protected areas. So areas which are under stress due to human activities, they may be called as national parks or wildlife reserves, etc. In these areas, no activity should be carried out without proper assessment. Activities will be highly regulated in this area. Second provision of this treaty is that we have to make sustainable use of marine genetic resources, and if there is any benefit that comes out of this, it should be shared equally amongst the countries. So, for example, let's say the US conducts some big research in the high sea and they find out something new. Let's say they find out that in the high sea they found a mineral that is a cure of cancer, that is a cure of bad diseases. So US has a responsibility to share that knowledge with all the other countries. So if there is any benefit that is derived out of the high sea, it should not be restricted to a handful of the countries. It should be equally shared with everyone. That is the idea of this particular provision. Also, there has to be a practice of environmental impact assessment for all major activities in the ocean. As you know, EIA, environmental impact assessment, means before carrying out any major project, you should first assess what will be the impact of this project on the environment. How would the environment be impacted by this, and only then take up this. Creation of a new body has also been a part of these provisions. It will create a new body to manage conservation of ocean life. Again, please remember, this treaty has been adopted by the UN, but it has not come into force so far. There are so many treaties that are adopted by the UN but never come into force because they are never ratified. This treaty also has to be ratified by at least 60 countries, and it has not been done so far at least. Another important international deal that was in the news was the Black Sea Grain Deal. Ever since the Ukraine-Russia conflict has begun, there has been a problem in Africa with regards to the food grains. Ukraine, Russia, both of these export food grains in large numbers, mainly to African countries. Because of this conflict between the two sides, there has been a stop in the supply of those food grains, thus leading to issues of food insecurity, not enough food grains being available. So a deal was signed called the Black Sea Grain Deal, mediated by Turkey, under which Russia said, we will allow cargo ships from Ukraine. We will check them. If they don't have any weapons, we will allow them to go from Ukraine and to come into Ukraine. But only those cargo ships that are carrying grain, and we will check them that they should not carry any weapons. This is called the Black Sea Grain Deal. It has been on and off. It was implemented first and extended for some time, and then again it was erupted. Russia said that no, we don't trust you, you are sending arms. So again, the deal is not permanent, it's on and off, on and off. And for you, from the examination point of view, the important part is to remember the countries that border with the Black Sea. I'll just show this to you. So this is the Black Sea. Now remember the countries that border the Black Sea. This is Ukraine. This is Russia. Third is Georgia. Fourth is Turkey. Fifth is Bulgaria. Then we have Romania. So these are the countries that border the Black Sea. The deal is that from these ports, Odisha, etc., from these ports, Ukraine can send their grain ships. Russia will check if there is any weapon, etc., and they will look into it. If there are no weapon, then they will allow this. So this area is the Crimea area, that is again under control of Russia only. The map might show this to you as a part of Ukraine, but this is the Crimea area, that Russia anyways controls. So this is not being used. It is Odisha and these ports are being used, and Turkey is the one that is ensuring that this deal goes ahead. What has Turkey done? Turkey has played a role, a kind of a mediator. A control center has been established in Istanbul. In the control center, there are members of the UN, Turkey, Russia and Ukraine. They together coordinate the entire process. So that is the entire idea, that this center will look into how this Black Sea Grain Deal can go ahead. The idea is to ensure that the food grains to be supplied from Ukraine to other countries, that supply is not disrupted. Next, another thing in the news, something called European Sky Shield Initiative, ESSI. So I'll tell you what this is. Like you all would have read about the Iron Dome project of Israel, a kind of a shield that Israel uses to make sure any incoming missile does not hit their country. Similarly, European countries thought, we are small in size, not as small as Israel, we are small in size, so why not, if we coordinate on everything else, why not coordinate and do this together? So European countries basically are coming together to make a collective project which will be kind of a shield for them for incoming missiles, etc. It's a project that is spearheaded by Germany, and many European countries are now joining it. The worrying factor for Europe was after Ukraine-Russia war began, they thought that we are living in an unstable world. We might also get attacked, so we better be prepared for it. So they thought about launching this initiative called European Sky Shield Initiative. Again, remember, it has been spearheaded by Germany. Many other countries have joined this. Interestingly, now Switzerland has also joined this. Now, Switzerland joining this is important because Switzerland has always maintained that it's a neutral country. Even during the World Wars, Switzerland remained a neutral country and it has not really been attacked by anyone because it has stuck to it. But now Switzerland has also become a part of this initiative. There are total 19 countries here now. The idea again is to have a unified air and missile defense system in Europe to bolster NATO's capabilities. Spearheaded by Germany, and it is again after the Ukraine-Russia war had started. The approach is to ensure that the entire continent has collective defense capabilities together and they are working with each other. Countries that have already become a part include Belgium, Bulgaria, Czech Republic, Norway, Slovakia, and even the UK is a part of this initiative. It started in October 2022 with 15 European countries coming together, spearheaded by Germany. Then Denmark and Sweden joined, then Austria, and now Switzerland has also joined in. Greece and Turkey would also join this initiative, and they have rather joined this initiative. So again, it's an initiative which Europe wants to establish to prevent any incoming missile attacks on them. Next important news from the UN. Recently, the UN invoked Article 99 of its charter, which is very, very, very rare. What exactly is this? So Article 99 of the UN says that the UN Secretary General, if he thinks there's a very, very important issue going on in the world which is being neglected by the UN, he can personally call a meeting and take up this issue. This is the Article 99. Now, what will happen if he takes up the issue? Nothing really, to be true. He does not have any binding powers to instruct UN Security Council to take some action. But what he can do is call for a special meeting, bring the world's attention, the attention of the entire UN towards this ongoing issue, maybe urge or request the UN Security Council to take some action. That is the only thing that they can do. They cannot forcefully take some action. This is written in Article 99. It's more of a warning. It is a diplomatic tool, allows a UN head, that is the UN Secretary General, to take up issues that are threatening international peace and security. It is not used very often. It has been used only 4 times in the past. During the Congo conflict 1960, East Pakistan, that is the Bangladesh war 1971, Iran and Lebanon conflicts. So the last time it was used was in 1989. It's more of a warning system, and now it has been invoked once again with respect to Israel, with respect to the UN Secretary General, talking to the entire world, asking them to convince Israel to stop its violence in the Gaza area. This gives power to the UN Secretary General to call for meeting of the Security Council on important matters, but again, it does not give the power to force the Security Council to adopt any resolution. Security Council will decide on its own whether they want to adopt any resolution or not. Security Council, as you know, has 5 permanent members, and if any one of those permanent members uses their veto, then obviously resolution will not be accepted. So the end power to adopt the resolution or not will still lie with the UN Security Council only. The UN General Secretary, Secretary General cannot really do much. It's more about showing the world, see, I am angry and I want the attention to be given to this issue. But the UN Secretary General alone would not be able to do anything, even under Article 99 of the UN Charter. Next news story, which was in the news also with respect to India, something called the Five Eyes Alliance. Why was it in the news? As you know, the Canadian government put a lot of allegations against India that Indian armed forces or other Indian security agencies are involved in a killing of a Canadian citizen. When India asked how or what information do you have, Canada has not shared any information, but Canada says that they got information or input from the partners of the Five Eyes Alliance. So Canada says that we are a part of a group called Five Eyes Alliance. They are the ones who shared information with us. Now this is not a new group, it's a very, very old group, but it has come in the news once again recently. So basically this is a group of English speaking countries, 5 English speaking countries that have come together: Australia, Canada, New Zealand, UK and the US. So 5 English speaking countries have come together called the Five Eyes Alliance. The idea is their security agencies, their intelligence network will work together. If any one of them detects a threat that may be problematic for other countries, they will share them within this group. It's an old group, as I said, it dates back to World War II. It was first made to work together to decode encrypted messages coming in from Germany and Japan. It has been working since then. Again, it is a group that shares its intelligence network with each other. If they think that there is some news that the other countries must also know, they will be sharing this. Canada says that they got information about India's involvement in the case with the Five Eyes Alliance partner members. When it first started, it was a collaboration between Britain and US only. Then after that, it became a bigger group with Canada being involved. Then New Zealand, Australia also joined it in 1956. The countries collaborate on surveillance and intelligence and signal sharing operations as well. Again, it's called the Five Eyes Alliance. Next important news, 2 more Indian cities have become a part of the UNESCO Creative Cities list. Now, the UNESCO Creative Cities list basically has a list of some cities around the world that are very, very famous for some creative arts. They recognize cities under 7 categories. To remember these, what are these 7 categories? Craft, folk art, media art, film design, gastronomy, that is food related, literature and music. These are the 7 categories under which the cities are listed. Recently, Kozhikode in Kerala and Gwalior in Madhya Pradesh have been added to this list. Kozhikode for literature and Gwalior for music. This is a list that started in 2004. It has about 300 odd countries from around the entire world. From India, the Ministry of Culture can send the application that we would want these cities to be included. Then UNESCO will look into it, whether the city deserves, whether it has a rich culture, history in that category or not. Other Indian cities that are a part of the list already include Srinagar and Jaipur from the field of craft and folk art, Mumbai in the field of film category, Hyderabad from gastronomy, Chennai and Varanasi from the music category. So now Kozhikode and Gwalior have also been added to this UNESCO Creative Cities list. Next, the Schengen Zone. What exactly is this? Basically, the idea is a lot of European countries have come together and they decided to strike down their borders in a sense that if someone comes in to Europe carrying a Schengen visa, on that one single visa you will be able to visit multiple countries. Usually what happens when a foreigner comes to India, India gives them our visa, you can only enter India with that visa. So countries usually give their own country specific visa. But with Schengen Zone, a lot of European countries have decided that you would be able to travel across Europe on that one visa. For example, let's say you take the visa of France. On the same visa from France, you can go to Switzerland, you can go to Italy, you can go to a lot of other countries in the region. That's how the Schengen Zone works. That is why you will see when the tourists go to Europe, they visit multiple countries because it's one single visa that is applicable. So now in the Schengen Zone, one other country has been included, that is Kosovo. Kosovo has now been included in this Schengen Zone, so you can visit Kosovo as well. It is the last Western Balkan country that has now gained free visa entry into the Schengen Zone. Kosovo citizens now means that they can also visit other countries if they want within this zone. So citizens of this entire group also have the right to visit each other's countries. They can work in each other's areas without a lot of documentation. The Schengen name comes from a village in Luxembourg where agreement was signed in 1985 by 6 EU founding members. It comprises right now of 27 European countries that have abolished their borders. It's not that if you become a part of EU, automatically you will become a part of Schengen. So that is not true. There are countries that are a part of EU, but they have not accepted to this Schengen idea. So it's not necessary that all the European Union countries will be a part of Schengen Zone. Do remember that some countries are a part of European Union, but they don't accept the Schengen. They have their own specific visa. Also, if you become a part of EU, you automatically don't gain entry into the Schengen. Like, for example, Romania, Bulgaria became a part of EU in 2007, but they became a part of Schengen Zone only in March 2024. So again, it's not automatic. admissions to this area, as I said, is not mandatory for all the EU members. For example, Cyprus, Romania, Bulgaria, Ireland, they are part of EU, but these 4 countries don't accept the Schengen. They have their own specific visa. Also, on the other hand, Schengen includes some countries that are not a part of EU. So if you are a part of EU, then you may or may not be a part of Schengen. On the other hand, even if you are not a part of European Union, you can still be a part of Schengen Zone. Those countries include Iceland, Switzerland, Norway as well. Last news for the day is that India launched UPI operations in Sri Lanka and Mauritius. As you know, UPI's reach has been expanded. Every few months you see a new country where UPI is rolled out. UPI was rolled out a few months back in Sri Lanka and Mauritius. Also, along with that, the RuPay card services were also introduced in Mauritius as a part of this initiative. The Indian government has been trying to push the use of RuPay and UPI as much as possible. RuPay is a competitor to Visa and MasterCard. Also, the NPCI International Payments have partnered with Lyra, which is a French e-commerce company, which has announced acceptance of UPI in France as well. So in France also UPI will be accepted. Apart from that, UPI is also accepted in Singapore, Bhutan, UAE. Now please remember, these are the countries where UPI is accepted. Then there would have been a news a few days back that you would have studied that India is launching UPI-like system for Namibia. For Namibia, we are making their own system from the scratch. There's a difference, please remember. In these countries, UPI is being accepted as a payment. So the phone pay app, Paytm, Google Pay app that you use in India, you'll be able to use that in these countries. For Namibia, we are building a new system altogether like UPI to run for themselves. This brings me to the end of the news for today. I hope you liked it. Again, if you want the PDF of this lecture, do become part of Telegram channel. Do hit the subscribe button if you have not hit it so far. I'll see you tomorrow in the next one. All the very best. Jai Hind.